The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's solar system without warning. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in strange symbols that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. The ship's arrival sent every human military base into high alert, but instead of weapons fire, they received a message. "We are the Galactic Defense Coalition," the transmission began. "Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel. We come to evaluate your potential membership in our alliance." Colonel Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of the human outpost on Kepler 442b, watching as three smaller ships detached from the massive vessel. Each ship looked completely different from the others. One resembled a crystalline formation that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. Another appeared to be made of living metal that rippled like water. The third looked like it had been carved from black stone, with edges so sharp they seemed to cut through space itself. "Are you nervous?" Lieutenant Lisa Carter asked, joining him at the window. She carried a tablet displaying the files Earth Command had compiled about their visitors. "Should I be?" Jake replied, adjusting his uniform. "It's not every day we meet 3 different alien species at once." The first aliens to board their station were the Vorthak. Commander Zethkar led the group, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that reflected the station's lights like mirrors. His eyes were yellow with vertical pupils, and when he spoke, rows of sharp teeth were visible. Behind him came 2 other Vorthak soldiers, their movements precise and predatory. "Your species interests us," Zethkar said, his voice coming through a translation device attached to his chest. "We have studied your history. You show promise as warriors." The second group to arrive made no sound as they moved. The insectoid creatures seemed to flow rather than walk. Their leader, who introduced herself as Hive Queen Zelnara, had 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like jewels. Her body was covered in a shell that looked both beautiful and deadly. "We sense strong minds among your kind," she communicated, though her mouth never moved. The words appeared directly in their thoughts. "But we must test your abilities before we can accept you into our alliance." The third visitor was the strangest of all. Prime Resonance. 7 appeared, to be made entirely of living crystal, constantly shifting between different colors. It spoke through vibrations that their translation equipment converted to words. "Your technology shows creativity," it said. "But the coalition requires more than clever inventions. We need allies who can fight when the time comes." Jake gestured for the aliens to follow him to the station's main conference room. Lisa walked beside him, occasionally glancing at their guests with curiosity rather than fear. The room had been prepared with different types of seating to accommodate their various anatomies. "Before we begin any formal evaluation," Jake said, "we'd like to understand what the coalition faces. What enemies require such careful selection of allies?" Zethkar's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. "The universe is not a peaceful place, Colonel Murphy. There are species that consume entire worlds, others that seek to enslave all thinking beings, and some that simply destroy everything they encounter. The coalition exists to stand against these threats. Each member species brings unique strengths," Zelnara added, her thoughts flowing into their minds. "The Vorthak are apex predators, masters of individual combat and tactical strikes. My people excel at coordination and strategic planning across vast distances. The Crystal Collective processes information and calculates possibilities beyond organic limitations." Prime Resonance 7's colors shifted to deep blues and purples. "But warfare in space is unlike anything your species has experienced." Battles can last for months. Supply lines stretch across star systems. Mental and physical endurance becomes as important as weapons and shields. Lisa leaned forward slightly. What kind of endurance are we talking about? Most biological species require extensive rest periods, Zethkar explained. Even we, Vorthak, despite being apex predators on our homeworld, need 8 to 10 hours of sleep per day. During extended campaigns, our effectiveness drops dramatically after 30 hours without rest. The same applies to all known predator species, Zelnara confirmed. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations, poor decision-making, and eventual collapse. No biological species has ever overcome this limitation. Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. They had read the files about human military history, about soldiers who had fought for days without proper rest during various conflicts throughout history. How do you typically handle this limitation? Jake asked. Rotation schedules, Prime Resonance 7 replied. Multiple shifts, extended supply chains to provide rest areas, and acceptance that combat effectiveness will decline significantly during prolonged engagements. Zethkar's yellow eyes focused on Jake. This is why we must test every potential member thoroughly. The Coalition cannot afford weak links. When the next great threat emerges, every species must be able to contribute meaningfully to our defense. What does the testing involve? Lisa asked. A comprehensive evaluation of your military capabilities, Zelnara explained. We simulate extended combat scenarios to measure your species' endurance, tactical thinking, and adaptation under stress. Most tests last 72 hours. 72 hours seems like a reasonable time frame, Jake said. The three aliens looked at each other. Zethkar made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, while Zelnara's compound eyes seemed to glitter with something like amusement. You misunderstand, Zethkar said. The test lasts 72 hours of continuous combat, simulation. No breaks, no scheduled rest periods. We monitor how long your people can maintain effectiveness before exhaustion forces them to stop. Most predator species begin showing severe degradation after 18 to 20 hours, Prime Resonance 7 added. The current record is held by the Vorthak at 31 hours, though they were barely functional by the end. Lisa made a note on her tablet. When would you like to begin? We have brought our testing equipment aboard your station, Zelnara said. We can begin as soon as you assemble a representative team. Jake nodded. Give us 6 hours to prepare. We'll need to brief our people and gather the necessary personnel. As the aliens left to prepare their equipment, Lisa turned to Jake. You think they realize what they're asking for? Jake smiled. I don't think they have any idea what human soldiers are capable of when they need to be. This should be interesting. Outside the station's windows, the massive Coalition ship waited in space, its alien crew preparing to witness something they had never seen before in all their travels across the galaxy. They expected to see another species reach its limits and fail, as every other biological species had done before. They had no idea they were about to discover that humans had evolved to push far beyond what any predator in the known universe considered possible. The test would begin soon, and with it, the aliens would learn their first lesson about humanity. Never assume you know what humans can do until you've seen them try. 6 hours later, Captain Ryan Brooks stood in the station's main cargo bay, which had been transformed into something resembling a military command center. The aliens had worked quickly, installing holographic projectors, sensor arrays, and monitoring equipment that hummed with unfamiliar energy. Impressive setup, Ryan said to Sergeant Amy Davis, who was checking her equipment one final time. Almost looks like the simulation rooms back on Earth. Except this one's designed by aliens who want to see us fail, Corporal Ben Martinez added, adjusting his tactical vest. No pressure there. The human test team consisted of 12 people, all volunteers from different military branches. Ryan had served in the Space Marines for 15 years and had led countless missions in Earth's asteroid belt. Amy had 8 years of experience in special operations, while Ben came from the engineering corps but had combat training. The rest of the team included communications specialists, medics, and tactical experts. Commander Zethkar approached them, his scales catching the light from the alien equipment. The simulation will begin shortly. Before we start, I must explain the parameters. Hive Queen Zelnara's thoughts flowed into their minds as she spoke. You will face continuous combat. Scenarios for 72 hours. The holographic environment will simulate various battlefield conditions: space combat, planetary assault, defensive positions, and emergency evacuations. The scenarios increase in complexity as time progresses. Prime Resonance 7 added, its crystalline form shifting between different shades of blue. Early stages test basic combat effectiveness. Later stages require advanced tactical thinking and coordination under extreme stress. Ryan nodded. Rules of engagement? Treat everything as real, Zethkar said. The holographic enemies will respond to your actions. Pain simulators will activate if you're injured, but won't cause actual harm. Death in the simulation means you're removed from the test. Medical monitoring? Amy asked. Continuous, Zelnara replied. We will track your vital signs, stress hormones, brain activity, and physical performance. If anyone reaches dangerous levels of exhaustion, they will be removed for their safety. Ben looked around at the alien equipment. What happens if we need to rest? The 3 aliens exchanged what might have been amused glances. That is precisely what we're testing, Zethkar explained. Most species begin showing significant performance degradation after 18 to 20 hours without sleep. We expect you to follow the same pattern. The longest any biological species has lasted was 31 hours, Prime Resonance 7 said, and they were barely functional by the end. We anticipate humans will perform similarly. Ryan kept his expression neutral, but internally he was already planning how to pace his team. 72 hours was a long time, but he'd been in situations that required sustained alertness for similar periods. During the asteroid mining conflicts, his unit had once spent 4 days in continuous combat operations with minimal rest. One more thing, Zethkar said. Your performance will be compared to similar tests conducted on other species. The Coalition needs to understand your capabilities relative to existing members. Amy raised her hand. Will we see the results from other species? After you complete the test, Zelnara confirmed. We maintain fairness by not showing comparative data beforehand. The aliens moved to their observation area, a raised platform surrounded by monitoring screens. Ryan gathered his team for a final briefing. Listen up, he said quietly. They think we're going to burn out in 18 to 20 hours. They're wrong. We've all been in extended operations before. The key is pacing ourselves and working as a team. What's our actual goal here? Amy asked. Show them what humans can do, Ryan replied. Don't try to prove anything. Just perform like you would in any real mission. Trust your training. Watch each other's backs and remember that this is just a test. Ben grinned. So, business as usual then? Exactly. The holographic environment activated around them, creating the interior of a damaged space station. Emergency lights flashed red, and the sound of hull breaches echoed through the simulated corridors. Ryan's tactical display showed enemy forces boarding from multiple points. "Contact!" Amy called out, raising her weapon as holographic enemies materialized at the far end of the corridor. The team moved with practiced efficiency. Ryan coordinated their positions while Amy and Ben took point. The other team members spread out according to their training, establishing overlapping fields of fire and maintaining communication. From their observation platform, the aliens watched with interest. The humans showed good tactical awareness and coordination, exactly what they expected from a military species. Nothing seemed unusual yet. "Standard performance for the first hour," Zethkar noted, making observations on his datapad. "Their coordination is adequate. Brain activity shows normal patterns," Zelnara added. "Stress levels are elevated but within expected parameters for combat simulation." As the hours passed, the scenarios became more complex. The humans faced space battles where they had to coordinate multiple ships, ground assaults requiring precise timing, and evacuation scenarios with civilian populations to protect. The team adapted to each new challenge, their performance remaining steady. 12 hours completed, Prime Resonance 7 announced. Human performance continues at baseline levels. This is consistent with other predator species. Ryan checked his watch. 12 hours down. 60 to go. He felt tired but alert, running on the combination of adrenaline and training that had carried him through countless real missions. Around him, his team continued to function effectively, calling out enemy positions and coordinating their responses. "How are you holding up?" he asked Amy during a brief lull between scenarios. "Could use some coffee," she replied, "but I'm good for a while yet." The aliens noticed that the humans seemed remarkably calm for 12 hours into the test. Most species began showing signs of fatigue by this point, but the human vital signs remained stable. 18 hours completed, Zethkar announced. This is typically when performance degradation begins, but the humans continued fighting with the same efficiency they'd shown at the start. Ryan was coordinating a complex defensive operation, while Amy led a counterattack against simulated enemy positions. Ben had taken over communications coordination, maintaining contact with their simulated support units. "Interesting," Zelnara observed. "Their brain activity shows some fatigue markers, but their tactical performance hasn't decreased. Perhaps they're simply maintaining appearances," Prime Resonance 7 suggested. "Many species attempt to push beyond their limits initially." "We shall see," Zethkar said. "The real test comes in the next few hours." As the 20-hour mark approached, the aliens prepared to observe the expected human collapse. They had seen this pattern with every other species tested. First came small mistakes, then larger errors in judgment, followed by hallucinations and eventual complete breakdown. But Ryan's team continued to function. They adapted to each new scenario, maintained their communication protocols, and showed no signs of the deterioration the aliens expected to see. 24 hours completed, Zethkar announced, his voice carrying a note of surprise. The humans had just exceeded the performance of most known predator species, and they showed no signs of stopping. If anything, they seemed to have settled into a sustainable rhythm that the aliens had never witnessed before. The real test was just beginning. 48 hours into the simulation, Commander Zethkar found himself staring at the human performance data with growing confusion. His scales had turned a darker shade, which among the Vorthak indicated deep concern. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, checking the readings for the third time in 10 minutes. Below them, Captain Ryan Brooks was coordinating a simulated planetary evacuation while under heavy enemy fire. His team moved with precision, establishing defensive perimeters and organizing civilian transport ships. After 2 full days without rest, they should have been making critical errors or hallucinating from exhaustion. Instead, they were performing better than most species did after just 12 hours. The equipment must be malfunctioning, Hive Queen Zelnara suggested, though her compound eyes remained fixed on the humans below. No biological species can maintain this level of performance after 48 hours without sleep. Dr. Helen Torres, the human medical officer assigned to monitor the test, looked up from her tablet. "Actually, this is pretty normal for extended operations. The team is tired, but they're nowhere near their limits yet." The 3 aliens turned to stare at her. Prime Resonance 7's crystalline structure shifted to deep red, indicating extreme surprise. "Normal?" Zethkar repeated. "Sergeant Davis just completed a complex tactical maneuver that would challenge a fresh Vorthak warrior. She has been awake for 48 hours. Dr. Torres shrugged. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We're designed to keep going when other species would give up. Our ancestors would literally chase prey for days until the animals collapsed from exhaustion." "That is impossible," Zelnara stated firmly. "Sleep is a biological necessity. All organic life requires regular rest, periods to function. Of course we need sleep eventually," Helen explained patiently, "but humans can function on very little sleep for extended periods during crisis situations. Our brains have mechanisms that other species apparently lack." She pulled up a holographic display showing human brain activity patterns. "See these sections here? They're showing what we call microsleep events. The brain briefly shuts down non-essential functions for a few seconds while maintaining alertness and motor control." The aliens studied the display with fascination. The human brain seemed to be performing impossible functions, staying awake while somehow still resting. "The human body also produces adrenaline and other chemicals that can override normal fatigue responses," Helen continued. "We can metabolize caffeine to extend alertness even further. During the old wars on Earth, soldiers regularly operated on 3 to 4 hours of sleep per day for weeks at a time." "You are claiming your species can ignore basic biological requirements?" Prime Resonance 7 asked, its structure now shifting between red and orange in confusion. "Not ignore," Helen corrected. "Adapt. Push beyond normal limits when necessary. Look at their stress hormone levels." She pointed to another display. "Elevated, yes, but stable. Their bodies are managing the prolonged stress without breaking down." Down in the simulation, Corporal Ben Martinez was troubleshooting a communications array while coordinating with orbital support. His movements were slightly slower than they had been 12 hours earlier, but his technical skills remained sharp. "This is unprecedented," Zethkar said quietly. "In our database of over 300 tested species, none have maintained combat effectiveness beyond 31 hours. "What's the longest any human has stayed awake?" Zelnara asked. Helen checked her files. "The record is 11 days, though that was under laboratory conditions. In combat situations, we have documented cases of soldiers remaining alert and functional for 5 to 7 days with minimal rest." The aliens fell silent, processing this information. Everything they thought they knew about biological limitations was being challenged by 12 humans who seemed to treat extended wakefulness as routine. "Show us this historical data," Prime Resonance 7 requested. Helen activated another display, showing footage from Earth's military archives. The Siege of Stalingrad, 1942. Human soldiers fought for months in brutal conditions with minimal sleep. The Battle of Britain, where pilots flew multiple missions per day for weeks. Vietnam War tunnel operations, where soldiers spent days underground in constant danger. The footage showed exhausted but functional human soldiers coordinating complex operations, making tactical decisions, and maintaining their equipment after days without proper rest. More recent examples, Helen continued, switching to newer footage. Special Forces operations where teams stayed in hostile territory for weeks. Navy crews during wartime staying alert for convoy protection. Disaster response teams working around the clock for days during emergencies. They look tired, Zelnara observed, but they are still functioning. Exactly. Tired, but functional. That's the key difference. Other species seem to hit a wall where they simply cannot continue. Humans just get tired and keep going anyway. Zethkar made a low growling sound. Are you telling us that what we are witnessing is not exceptional performance for your species? Well, this team is made up of experienced soldiers, Helen said. But no, this isn't beyond normal human capability. During World War II, factory workers regularly pulled 12-hour shifts for years. Medical residents work 36-hour shifts as part of their training. Long-haul truck drivers, emergency responders, military personnel during deployments, extended wakefulness is common in many human occupations. The aliens watched as Captain Brooks coordinated a complex multi-front battle while running a tactical analysis that would normally require a full command staff. His team moved like clockwork, each member performing their role despite being awake for 48 hours. What is their current cognitive function compared to baseline? Prime Resonance 7 asked. Helen checked her readings. About 85% of normal. They're making slightly more minor errors. Reaction times are down about 15%, but strategic thinking and coordination remain largely intact. At 48 hours without sleep? Zethkar's voice carried disbelief. My people would be hallucinating by now. Different evolutionary paths, Helen explained. Humans developed in environments where persistence meant survival, the ability to keep hunting, keep traveling, keep fighting when others gave up was literally a matter of life and death for our ancestors. Down in the simulation, Sergeant Amy Davis was analyzing enemy movement patterns while coordinating with simulated Allied forces. Her analysis was thorough and accurate, showing no signs of the confused thinking that should accompany severe sleep deprivation. How much longer can they continue? Zelnara asked. Helen considered the question. Hard to say exactly. They're pacing themselves well, staying hydrated, managing their energy. I'd estimate they could maintain current performance levels for at least another day, maybe 2. The aliens stared at her in shock. The humans had already exceeded their wildest expectations, and their medical officer was casually suggesting they could continue for days longer. This changes everything, Zethkar said quietly. If humans can maintain combat effectiveness for extended periods without rest, your tactical doctrines would need complete revision. Prime Resonance 7 agreed. Supply chains, rotation schedules, campaign planning, everything assumes regular rest requirements. Below them, the human team continued their simulated battle, unaware that their simple endurance was revolutionizing the aliens' understanding of biological warfare capabilities. They were just doing their jobs, the way humans always had, by refusing to quit when things got difficult. The test was far from over, but the aliens were already beginning to realize they had discovered something extraordinary. Commander Zethkar paced back and forth on the observation platform, his claws clicking against the metal floor. I demand to see additional proof of these claims about human endurance. What you are showing us defies everything we know about biological warfare. Lieutenant Lisa Carter had joined them in the observation area, carrying a datapad loaded with Earth's military history. You want proof? I've got centuries of it. She activated a holographic display that filled the air above them with historical documents, photographs, and video footage. Let's start with something recent. Staff Sergeant Kevin Walsh, 2387. His unit was sent to rescue colonists from a planet, under attack by raiders. The footage showed a team of 8 humans moving through hostile terrain. The timestamp indicated they had been operating for 4 days straight. Watch their coordination, Lisa said. 96 hours into the mission, and they're still maintaining proper tactical formations, communicating effectively, and making sound decisions. The aliens watched as the humans moved through what appeared to be a bombed-out city, checking corners, covering each other's movements, and coordinating with orbital support. Despite being awake for 4 days, their actions were precise and professional. "This cannot be real," Hive Queen Zelnara protested. "At 96 hours, any biological entity should be dead or completely non-functional." Kevin's team completed their mission, Lisa continued. They extracted 47 civilians and neutralized the raider threat. Kevin himself stayed awake for another 18 hours during the debrief and mission report. Prime Resonance 7's crystalline structure flickered rapidly between colors. "Show us more data. We need extensive proof of these capabilities." Lisa scrolled through her files. World War II, Pacific Theater. Navy crews during the Battle of Midway stayed at general quarters for over 60 hours. They were tracking enemy movements, coordinating airstrikes, and managing damage control while under constant threat of attack. New footage appeared showing sailors working frantically on a damaged ship. The men looked exhausted but continued performing complex technical tasks. "Here's another one," Lisa said. "The Siege of Stalingrad, 1942. Soldiers fought in the ruins of the city for months, often staying awake for days at a time. Snipers would maintain overwatch positions for 72 hours straight." The display showed grainy footage of soldiers moving through destroyed buildings, setting up defensive positions and coordinating attacks. Despite obvious fatigue, they moved with purpose and maintained tactical awareness. "These examples span centuries," Zethkar observed. "This is a consistent pattern across your species' military history." "Absolutely," Lisa confirmed. During the Vietnam War, Special Forces teams would spend weeks in enemy territory with minimal sleep. Tunnel rats would work underground for days in cramped, dangerous conditions. Navy SEALs routinely complete missions requiring 5 to 7 days of continuous operation. She switched to more recent footage. "Here's a counter-terrorism operation from 2341. The team was deployed for 8 days in hostile urban terrain. They neutralized multiple targets, rescued hostages, and coordinated with local forces. The aliens watched human soldiers moving through city streets, engaging in firefights, and conducting complex tactical operations. The timestamp showed they had been operating for over a week with minimal rest." "Look at their decision-making process," Lisa pointed out. Day 6 of the operation, and they're still analyzing intelligence, adapting to changing situations, and executing precise tactical maneuvers. Zelnara's compound eyes reflected the holographic images. The mental strain alone should have incapacitated them. "That's the thing about humans," Lisa explained. "We adapt to stress in ways that apparently other species don't. Our brains can compartmentalize, focusing on immediate tasks while pushing fatigue into the background. She brought up a new set of data. Medical studies show that humans under combat stress can maintain cognitive function at 70 to 80% of normal levels for up to 2 weeks with minimal sleep. Non-combat situations allow for even longer periods of sustained activity. 2 weeks? Prime Resonance 7 structure turned completely transparent in shock. Impossible! Antarctic research stations, Lisa said, bringing up new footage. During the polar winter, researchers work in continuous darkness for months. They adapt their sleep schedules to maintain alertness during critical periods. Some researchers have documented staying awake for 12 days during emergency situations. The display showed scientists working in extreme conditions, maintaining complex equipment, and conducting research in one of Earth's most hostile environments. Emergency response teams during natural disasters, Lisa continued. Earthquake rescue, operations where teams work for days straight, searching for survivors. Hurricane relief efforts where responders stay active for weeks. Wildfire fighting crews who work 18-hour days for months. Each example showed humans pushing beyond what the aliens considered possible, maintaining effectiveness in situations that would have broken other species. Your space exploration missions, Zethkar said quietly. How do your crews handle extended voyages? Asteroid belt mining operations regularly last 6 months, Lisa replied. Crews work 12-hour shifts for weeks at a time. During emergencies, they've been documented working for days straight to repair critical systems or respond to accidents. She showed footage of miners working in the dangerous environment of space, managing complex equipment and coordinating rescue operations during system failures. Deep space exploration missions can last years, she added. Crews maintain alertness during critical phases like planetary surveys or first contact situations. The Marco Polo expedition stayed awake for 11 days straight during their approach to the Proxima Centauri system. The aliens studied the data in stunned silence. Every example showed humans casually exceeding what they considered the absolute limits of biological endurance. This explains certain anomalies in your historical records, Zelnara said slowly. We studied your conflicts during our preliminary assessment. The outcomes seemed impossible given the resources involved. Which conflicts? Lisa asked. Small. Human forces defeating much larger enemies. Prolonged sieges where defenders held out far longer than should have been possible. Naval battles where your ships remained effective despite damage that should have incapacitated the crews. Ah, Lisa smiled. You were probably looking at battles where humans simply refused to give up. That's pretty much our entire military history. Below them, Captain Brooks and his team were entering their 60th hour of continuous operations. They were coordinating a complex evacuation while under attack from 3 different directions. Their movements were slightly slower than at the beginning, but their tactical thinking remained sharp. How are they still functional? Zethkar asked, staring at the combat data. They're tired, Lisa admitted, but they're nowhere near their breaking point. Kevin Walsh's unit in that rescue mission I showed you? They were actually performing below average for Special Forces operations. The mission was considered routine by our standards. The aliens looked at each other, then back at the humans below. They were beginning to understand that they hadn't just discovered a new member species for their coalition. They had found something that would fundamentally change how warfare was conducted across the galaxy. The test was entering its 3rd day, and the humans showed no signs of stopping. The simulation entered its 4th day, and the alien observers were no longer just confused. They were beginning to feel something approaching fear. Commander Zethkar's scales had darkened to almost black, a color that among the Vorthak indicated extreme agitation. 84 hours, he announced, his voice tight with disbelief. They have been fighting for 84 hours without rest. Captain Ryan Brooks continued to coordinate his team through another complex scenario. This time they were defending a space station while coordinating the evacuation of civilians from multiple levels. His voice was slightly hoarse, but his tactical commands remained clear and precise. Martinez, take your team to Section C and establish a defensive perimeter, Ryan ordered. Davis, I need you to coordinate with the evacuation ships on Docking Bay 7. Corporal Ben Martinez moved with purpose, his rifle steady as he led his squad through the simulated corridors. After 3.5 days without sleep, he should have been stumbling, making critical errors, or seeing things that weren't there. Instead, he was executing a complex tactical maneuver that required split-second timing and precise coordination. Sir, I'm reading hostile contacts on level 12, he reported back to Ryan. Looks like they're trying to flank our position. Dr. Helen Torres monitored the vital signs from her position at the medical station. Elevated stress hormones, but still within manageable ranges, she reported to the aliens. Heart rates are up, but that's expected during combat operations. Brain activity shows fatigue markers, but cognitive function remains stable. Hive Queen. Zelnara studied the readouts with growing amazement. Their reaction times have decreased only marginally. Most species would be hallucinating by now. What hallucinations do other species typically experience? Helen asked with professional curiosity. Visual distortions, hearing sounds that aren't there, paranoid thoughts about allies becoming enemies, Prime Resonance 7 explained. Sleep deprivation causes complete breakdown of logical thinking. Humans get tired and irritable, Helen said. Sometimes we see movement in our peripheral vision that isn't there, but our brains usually filter that out. We don't typically experience the severe breaks from reality you're describing. Down in the simulation, Sergeant Amy Davis was analyzing enemy movement patterns while coordinating with 3 different support teams. She had been awake for 84 hours, but her analysis was thorough and accurate. Enemy forces are concentrating on levels 8 through 12, she reported. I recommend we consolidate our defensive lines and prepare for a coordinated assault. Her tactical assessment was sound, showing no signs of the confused thinking that should accompany such extreme sleep deprivation. How is this possible? Zethkar muttered, checking the monitoring equipment for the 100th time. Our finest warriors would be completely non-functional by now. Different evolutionary pressures, Helen explained. Your species evolved as ambush predators, right? Quick strikes, then retreat to rest and digest? Correct, Zethkar confirmed. We are adapted for short bursts of intense activity followed by recovery periods. Humans evolved differently. We're persistence hunters. Our ancestors would track prey for days, sometimes weeks, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Then, we'd walk up and finish it off. The aliens stared at her in horror. The image of early humans literally running animals to death over extended periods was deeply disturbing to species that viewed quick kills as natural. You hunted by exhausting other creatures? Zelnara asked. Still do, in some parts of Earth, Helen replied. There are tribes in Africa that can run down antelopes, zebras, even young elephants by simply following them until they can't run anymore. The hunt can last 2 or 3 days. That's barbaric, Prime Resonance 7 said, its structure flashing red. That's effective, Helen corrected, and it shaped our entire physiology. Humans can regulate body temperature while running. We can maintain steady energy output for extended periods, and our brains can stay alert and focused during prolonged physical stress. She gestured toward the simulation where the human team was entering their 4th day of continuous operations. What you're seeing isn't exceptional performance for humans. It's normal. Corporal Martinez was troubleshooting a communications array that had been damaged in the simulated battle. His hands moved steadily as he rewired circuits and tested connections. After 84 hours awake, his technical skills remained sharp. "All stations, communications are back online," he reported. "I'm reading clear signals from all evacuation ships." "Outstanding work, Martinez," Ryan replied. "Davis, what's the status on those hostile contacts?" "They're massing for an assault." "On level 10, Amy reported. "I count at least 40 enemy units preparing to breach our perimeter." The coordination between the team members remained smooth and professional. They anticipated each other's needs, covered potential weaknesses in their formation, and adapted quickly to changing tactical situations. "This is unprecedented," Zethkar said quietly. "If humans can maintain combat effectiveness for days without rest, it completely changes the nature of warfare." "How so?" Helen asked. "Traditional military doctrine assumes regular rest cycles," Zelnara explained. "Battle plans account for decreased effectiveness after extended operations. Supply lines include rest facilities. Entire strategies are built around the assumption that forces will need recovery time. Humans don't seem to follow those rules," Prime Resonance 7 observed. "They just continue." "We do need rest eventually," Helen said, "but not as often as you might expect, and even when we're tired, we can push through for extended periods if necessary." The aliens watched as the human team executed another complex tactical maneuver. Ryan was coordinating defensive positions while Amy led a counterattack against simulated enemies. Ben maintained communications and provided technical support. All of this after nearly 4 full days without sleep. "What happens when they do finally rest?" Zethkar asked. "They sleep deeply for 8 to 12 hours, then wake up ready to go again," Helen replied. "Human recovery is remarkably efficient. We can bounce back from extended operations faster than most species recover from normal activity." "You're describing a species designed for continuous warfare," Zelnara said with something approaching awe. "Not designed for it," Helen corrected. "Adapted to it. Humans spent millions of years in environments where the ability to keep going when others couldn't meant the difference between survival and extinction. Down in the simulation, the team was preparing for what appeared to be a final assault by enemy forces. They moved with practiced efficiency, setting up overlapping fields of fire and coordinating their defensive positions. "Hostile forces approaching from multiple vectors," Amy reported. "This looks like their main assault." "All teams, prepare for contact," Ryan ordered. "Remember your training and watch each other's backs." The aliens leaned forward, watching as the humans prepared to face their most complex challenge yet, after 84 hours of continuous operations. By all known biological principles, they should have been completely incapable of handling such a situation. Instead, they looked like they were just getting started. The final phase of the test was about to begin, and the aliens were starting to understand that they had discovered something far more significant than just another potential ally. They had found a species that redefined what biological warfare could accomplish. Prime Resonance 7 had been analyzing the data continuously for the past 6 hours, its crystalline structure shifting through every color spectrum as it processed information that challenged everything the Coalition understood about biological warfare. "I have completed my analysis," it announced, its structure settling into a deep purple that indicated profound revelation. The implications are staggering. Commander Zeth Kar and Hive Queen Zelnara turned their attention from the ongoing simulation to listen. Below them, the human team was entering their 96th hour of continuous operations, showing no signs of the complete breakdown that should have occurred days ago. "Explain your findings," Zeth Kar requested, though his voice carried a tone that suggested he dreaded the answer. "Humans did not evolve for warfare as we understand it," Prime Resonance 7 began. "They evolved for something far more terrifying: persistence predation. They are biological endurance machines designed to outlast any opponent." The crystal entity projected a holographic display showing various Earth animals. "Observe their prey species. Antelopes can run at 60 kilometers per hour, but only for short distances. Zebras can maintain 40 kilometers per hour for perhaps an hour. Even large predators like lions can only sustain high-intensity activity for minutes. Now observe humans," it continued, showing footage of human persistence hunters. "Maximum speed of only 30 kilometers per hour, but they can maintain this pace for hours. More importantly, they can continue at reduced speeds for days while tracking prey." Zelnara studied the data with growing horror. "They literally run other creatures to death." "Precisely. But the implications extend far beyond hunting. This evolutionary adaptation created a species with unprecedented endurance capabilities. Examine their cardiovascular system, designed for extended aerobic activity, their cooling system, the most efficient of any large mammal, their energy metabolism, optimized for sustained output rather than peak performance." Captain Ryan Brooks was coordinating a complex multi-front defense while analyzing enemy attack patterns. After 4 full days without sleep, his strategic thinking remained sharp and his tactical decisions sound. "Their brain chemistry is equally remarkable," Prime Resonance 7 continued. "They produce chemicals that suppress fatigue sensations during stress. Their neural pathways can function on minimal sleep by shutting down non-essential processes while maintaining critical functions." Dr. Helen Torres looked up from her monitoring station. "Actually, that's just the beginning. You should see what happens when humans are really motivated." "What do you mean?" Zeth Kar asked. "Everything you've observed so far is normal human performance under standard stress conditions," Helen explained. "But humans can push much further when the stakes are high enough." She activated her own display showing historical footage. Parent, protecting children, soldiers defending their comrades, people trapped in disasters. Humans can access reserves that even we don't fully understand. The footage showed examples of extraordinary human endurance. A mother lifting a car to save her trapped child, a soldier carrying wounded comrades for miles through hostile territory, rescue workers staying active for weeks during major disasters. During extreme emotional stress, humans can ignore pain, exhaustion, and even serious injuries, Helen continued. "We've documented cases of people functioning normally with broken bones, severe blood loss, and injuries that should have been incapacitating." "Impossible," Zelnara protested. "Biological systems have absolute limits." "Humans routinely exceed those limits," Prime Resonance 7 confirmed, its analysis complete. "They are not bound by the same physiological constraints that limit other species." Down in the simulation, Corporal Ben Martinez was repairing critical systems while under heavy fire. His movements remained steady and precise despite operating on his 96th hour without sleep. "Martinez is performing technical work that requires fine motor control and complex problem-solving," Helen pointed out. after 4 days awake. Most humans would show some degradation in these skills, but military training helps them maintain functionality even under extreme stress. How much longer can they continue? Zethkar asked, though he seemed reluctant to hear the answer. Hard to say exactly, Helen replied. The current record for a human staying awake under controlled conditions is 11 days. In combat situations, we have documented effective performance for up to 7 days. 7 days? Zelnara's compound eyes widened. A full week of continuous combat operations? The siege of Firebase Charlie during the colonial rebellions, Helen said, bringing up the historical record. Garrison of 40 humans held off a force of over 300 attackers for 8 days straight. They maintained defensive operations, coordinated supply drops, and executed counterattacks throughout the entire siege. The footage showed exhausted but determined human soldiers manning defensive positions, caring for wounded, and continuing to fight effectively after a week of continuous battle. They look barely human, Zethkar observed. But they're still fighting, Helen pointed out. Still making tactical decisions, still coordinating as a unit, still effective. Prime Resonance 7 processed this new information. If humans can maintain combat effectiveness for a full week, it fundamentally changes every military calculation in our database. How so? Helen asked. Coalition battle plans assume 48 to 72-hour engagement limits, Zelnara explained. After that, forces must be rotated, supply lines established for rest facilities, and combat effectiveness drops to 20% of baseline. Humans appear to maintain 70 to 80% effectiveness for at least a week, Prime Resonance 7 added. This means human forces could continue fighting long after enemy forces have collapsed from exhaustion. It gets better, Helen said with a slight smile. Humans actually perform better under certain types of stress. Combat situations trigger hormonal responses that can enhance focus, increase pain tolerance, and improve coordination. She showed them the current vital signs from the test team. Look at their stress hormone levels. Elevated, yes, but stable. Their bodies have adapted to the prolonged stress and found a sustainable balance. This is why the historical record seemed impossible, Zethkar realized. Small human forces defeating larger enemies, extended sieges, impossible odds overcome. These weren't exceptions, they were normal human capabilities. Exactly, Helen confirmed. What you consider extraordinary endurance, we consider standard military performance. Below them, Sergeant Amy Davis was coordinating with multiple support units while analyzing enemy movements and planning defensive strategies. Her performance after 96 hours remained professional and competent. We need to understand the strategic implications, Zelnara said. If humans can fight for days while other species collapse after hours, they don't just have an advantage. They have a completely different approach to warfare. Coalition doctrine assumes wars of attrition favor the side with better supply, lines and rotation schedules, Prime Resonance 7 explained. But humans can simply outlast opponents regardless of initial advantages. They don't win by being stronger or faster, Zethkar said slowly. They win by refusing to quit. That's probably the most accurate assessment of human military capability I've ever heard, Helen said approvingly. The test was entering its final phase, but the aliens were already beginning to understand that accepting humans into the coalition wouldn't just add another member species. It would fundamentally change how they thought about warfare, endurance, and the very limits of biological capability. The humans had revealed something the galaxy had never seen before. a species that viewed impossible odds as merely inconvenient. The emergency session of the Coalition Leadership Council convened in virtual space. Representatives from dozens of species gathering in holographic form around a massive conference table. Commander Zethkar stood at the center, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something approaching bewilderment. "Fellow council members," he began, "I am transmitting data from the Human Endurance Evaluation. I must warn you that what you are about to see will challenge everything we understand about biological warfare capabilities." The council chamber filled with murmurs of curiosity and skepticism. Admiral Korth of the Selenian Empire, a species known for their strategic brilliance, leaned forward in his crystalline exoskeleton. "Surely you exaggerate, Commander Zethkar. We have tested hundreds of species. The biological limits are well established." "That is what we believed," Zethkar replied, activating the holographic display. "The humans have been in continuous combat simulation for 108 hours. They show no signs of stopping." The chamber fell silent. 108 hours exceeded the endurance of every known species by more than 3 full days. "Equipment malfunction?" suggested General Thys of the Arachnid Collective. "We have verified all systems multiple times," Hive Queen Zelnara responded, her thoughts flowing into the minds of the assembled leaders. "The humans are operating at 75% of baseline effectiveness after 4.5 days, without rest." High Admiral Vex of the Aquatic Federation's gill slits fluttered in agitation. "Impossible! Show us this simulation." The display shifted to show Captain Ryan Brooks coordinating a massive space battle. His tactical decisions were sound, his coordination with multiple units remained sharp, and his strategic thinking showed no signs of the deterioration that should have rendered him completely ineffective days ago. "What you are witnessing is not exceptional human performance," Zethkar explained. "According to their medical officer, this is standard capability for trained human military personnel." Admiral Zara Quinn's image materialized in the chamber, connecting via quantum communication from Earth. She appeared calm and professional, unaware that her casual presence was about to revolutionize galactic warfare doctrine. "Admiral Quinn," Zethkar said with formal respect, "we would appreciate your assessment of your team's current performance." Zara glanced at the simulation data. "They're doing well, though I notice some minor fatigue indicators. The team is performing slightly below optimal levels due to the extended duration and relatively comfortable environment." "Below optimal?" Admiral Korth's voice carried disbelief. "They have been fighting for over 100 hours. "Yes, it's been a long test," Zara agreed. "Though I should mention that this team volunteered from their vacation time. Captain Brooks specifically requested this assignment because he thought it would be a fun challenge compared to their last deployment." The council chamber erupted in shocked exclamations and urgent communications between species representatives. "Admiral," General Thys interjected, "what was their last deployment?" "Operation Deep Strike," Zara replied matter-of-factly. 7-day, continuous operation in the asteroid belt, neutralizing pirate bases while coordinating with civilian evacuation efforts. Standard counterinsurgency work. 7 days? High Admiral Vex's voice rose to a higher pitch. "Continuous operations. For 7 days? Actually, it was 7 days and 16 hours, Zara corrected. The team requested permission to complete the final phase rather than hand off to fresh units. They said they had momentum and didn't want to break their rhythm. Prime Resonance 7, who had been silently processing data, suddenly flashed brilliant white. "Admiral Quinn?" What would you consider exceptional endurance performance for human forces? Zara thought for a moment. The longest documented military operation was Operation Marathon during the Titan Rebellion. Special Forces Team Delta maintained active operations for 19 days straight, though that included brief rest periods when they could manage it. 19 days, Zethkar repeated numbly. They were highly motivated, Zara explained. The rebels were using civilian hostages, so the team couldn't risk rotating out. They just kept going until the situation was resolved. What about normal deployment schedules? Admiral Korth asked, clearly struggling to process this information. Standard deployment is 6 months, Zara replied. Crews work 12-hour shifts, but during emergencies or combat situations, they can extend to continuous operations as needed. Most experienced personnel can handle several days straight without significant performance degradation. The Council members exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. The universal look of beings realizing their entire understanding of warfare had just become obsolete. Admiral Quinn, Hive Queen Zelnara interjected, how do human forces compare to your historical military records? Current capabilities are actually somewhat limited by our equipment, Zara admitted. Historical human forces regularly operated under much more challenging conditions. Ancient armies would march for days, then fight battles, then continue marching. Naval crews during the Age of Sail would remain alert for weeks during storms or combat. She activated her own display, showing historical footage. World War II submarine crews stayed submerged for weeks under constant threat. Arctic explorers maintained alertness for months in complete darkness. Early space colonists worked 18-hour days for years while establishing settlements. These are not exceptional individuals? General Theiss asked. No. This represents normal human capability under stress, Zara confirmed. Obviously, some individuals perform better than others, but extended endurance is a basic human trait. Admiral Korth made a sound that the translation systems couldn't interpret. Admiral Quinn, do you understand the strategic implications of what you're describing? I assume you're concerned about how this affects military planning? Zara asked. Human forces do require different logistical support than other species might. We need less rest infrastructure but more food and water due to our higher metabolic rate during extended operations. The implications go far beyond logistics, Zethkar said grimly. Human forces could maintain offensive operations long after enemy forces have collapsed from exhaustion. Traditional defensive strategies that rely on outlasting attackers would be completely ineffective. Oh, Zara said, finally understanding their concern. You're worried about humans in actual combat situations. Should we be? High Admiral Vex asked. Zara smiled reassuringly. Humans prefer negotiated solutions to conflicts. We're much better at building things than destroying them. Our endurance capabilities are primarily useful for exploration, disaster, response, and defensive operations. But if human forces were committed to offensive operations? Prime Resonance 7 asked. Well, Zara said thoughtfully, historically speaking, human military forces have been remarkably effective when properly motivated. We tend to be very persistent about achieving our objectives. The understatement hung in the virtual chamber like a gravitational anomaly, bending the thoughts of every council member around its implications. Down in the simulation, the human test team was approaching their 120th hour of continuous operations. They were coordinating a complex planetary evacuation while under attack from multiple enemy forces, their performance still well within acceptable military standards. We need to discuss this further, Admiral Korth said finally. In private session. As the formal meeting adjourned, the council members were left to contemplate a fundamental shift in their understanding of warfare. They had thought they were evaluating a potential ally. Instead, they had discovered a species that redefined what biological forces could accomplish in extended conflict. The humans, meanwhile, continued their simulation, unaware that they had just revolutionized galactic military doctrine simply by doing their jobs. 120 hours after the test began, Commander Zethkar stood before the human team with a formal document that would change the course of galactic history. His scales had finally returned to their normal color, though his expression remained one of profound respect mixed with healthy wariness. "Captain Brooks," he announced formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Defense Coalition, I hereby recommend humanity for immediate membership with full alliance privileges." Captain Ryan Brooks looked up from the tactical display he had been studying. After 5 full days of continuous operations, he appeared tired but alert, his uniform still properly maintained despite the extended simulation. "Thank you, Commander," Ryan replied. "I take it the test is complete?" "More than complete," Zethkar said. "You have exceeded every expectation and redefined our understanding of biological warfare capabilities." Sergeant Amy Davis powered down her weapon systems and stretched her shoulders. "Good timing. We were just discussing whether to request an extension to test some of the new coordination protocols we developed during the scenarios." The alien stared at her. After 5 days without sleep, she was considering continuing the test voluntarily. "An extension?" Hive Queen Zelnara asked, her compound eyes reflecting disbelief. "Just another day or two," Corporal Ben Martinez added, checking his equipment. "We've figured out some interesting tactical applications for the holographic environment. It would be useful to verify our theories." Prime Resonance 7's crystalline structure shifted to a color the translation systems couldn't identify. "You wish to continue fighting after 120 hours? "It's been an interesting challenge," Ryan said simply. "Different from our usual operations, but good training value. The scenarios were well designed." Dr. Helen Torres approached with her final medical reports. "All team members remain within acceptable parameters for continued operations. Elevated fatigue markers, but nothing approaching dangerous levels." "Acceptable parameters?" Zethkar repeated. "They have been awake for 5 days straight." "Like I mentioned before, this is within normal human capability," Helen replied, "though I would recommend they get some rest soon. They're starting to show minor performance decreases." Lieutenant Lisa Carter joined them, carrying the official coalition membership documents. "I assume this means we passed?" "Passed?" Zelnara's thoughts carried a tone of overwhelming understatement. "You have achieved something unprecedented in coalition history. No species has ever maintained combat effectiveness beyond 31 hours. Actually," Ryan said, consulting his tactical log, "I think we could have done better if we'd known the parameters in advance. We paced ourselves for a 72-hour test. If we'd known it would run longer, we could have optimized our energy management." The aliens exchanged glances that spoke of shared realization and mild terror. "What changes would you have made?" Prime Resonance 7 asked with scientific curiosity. "More aggressive tactical approaches early on," Amy explained. "We were conserving energy for what we thought would be the final phase. If we'd known we were going for 5 days, we could have maintained higher intensity throughout." "Higher intensity?" Zethkar's voice carried disbelief. "Standard combat doctrine for extended operations," Ben added. "Maintain peak performance. As long as possible, then settle into sustainable operational tempo. We went into sustainable mode too early." Dr. Torres nodded in agreement. The team was performing at about 60% of their actual capability for most of the test. They were being cautious. The concept that the humans had been holding back during a test that had already shattered every known endurance record was almost too much for the aliens to process. "Admiral Quinn should be joining us shortly," Lisa announced, checking her communications device. She wanted to personally congratulate the team on their performance. Admiral Zara Quinn materialized. Via holographic projection, her image clear and professional. "Outstanding work, everyone. I've been monitoring the test results, and I'm impressed by your adaptation to the unusual environment." "Thank you, ma'am," Ryan replied. "The team performed well under interesting conditions. I understand there's some discussion about extending." "The test?" Zara asked. "The scenarios were excellent training opportunities," Amy explained. "We developed some new coordination techniques that could be valuable for future operations." "How are you feeling about continuing?" Zara asked. Ryan consulted with his team briefly. "We're tired, but functional. Another 12 to 24 hours would be manageable if there's training value." Zethkar made a sound that the translation systems couldn't interpret. The idea that humans were casually discussing extending an already impossible test was beyond his comprehension. "Actually," Zara said, "I think you've accomplished enough for one test. Besides, you're scheduled for the Titan Station inspection next week, and that's a 6-day operation." "6 days?" Zelnara asked weakly. "Routine maintenance and security evaluation," Zara explained. "Nothing too demanding, but it requires sustained attention to detail." The aliens realized that what they had just witnessed wasn't a demonstration of maximum human capability. It was a routine display of standard endurance that the humans considered unremarkable. "Commander Zethkar," Zara continued, "I trust this. Evaluation provides the information you need for our coalition membership application?" "More than sufficient," Zethkar replied formally. "However, we must also assign a new classification to your species. Standard categories do not adequately describe human capabilities." "What classification?" Lisa asked. "Apex Endurance Predators," Prime Resonance 7 announced. "A new category created specifically for humanity." "That sounds ominous," Helen observed. "It is merely descriptive," Zelnara assured her, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It indicates that human forces operate under different parameters than other coalition members." "Will this affect our integration into coalition forces?" Ryan asked. "Significantly," Zethkar admitted. "Traditional military doctrine assumes regular rest cycles, rotation schedules, and endurance limitations that apparently do not apply to humans." "We can provide training materials," Zara offered. "Human military doctrine has always accounted for extended operations. We have established protocols for sustainable long-term deployment." "That would be invaluable," Zethkar said carefully. The formal ceremonies concluded and the human team finally powered down their equipment. The aliens were left to contemplate what they had witnessed. The coalition had expected to evaluate a potential new member. Instead, they had discovered a species that would fundamentally change how they approached warfare, exploration, and crisis response. Captain Brooks and his team gathered their gear, discussing plans for their upcoming inspection mission as if the past 5 days had been a routine training exercise. Their casual attitude toward what the aliens considered an impossible feat of endurance was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire evaluation. "One final question," Zethkar said as the humans prepared to leave. "The volunteers for this test, are they representative of standard human military personnel?" "Pretty much," Ryan replied. "Standard selection criteria, normal training backgrounds. We're not special forces or elite units. What would elite human units be capable of? Prime Resonance 7 asked, though its color suggested it dreaded the I answer. Ryan and his team exchanged glances and smiled. You probably don't want to know, Amy said diplomatically. As the humans departed for their long-overdue rest, the aliens were left with the sobering realization that they had just witnessed what humanity considered ordinary performance. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were humans who could do even more. The Coalition had gained a powerful new ally, but they had also discovered that their understanding of biological limitations had been fundamentally flawed. Humans didn't just join the galactic community. They redefined what was possible within it. The age of human endurance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.